Okay, let's talk about sex. So, our topic for this little video is mate choice and sexual selection. I'll let you enjoy those little comics. So, can I change this? Are you gonna work? No! How about this? Okay, that's what I have to do. So, how does sexual selection shape evolution? Okay, we talked about natural selection. Remember, what goes into natural selection? Well, what do you need? You need variation, you need heredity, and you need differential reproduction. Some reproduce more than others. And with sexual selection, which can be thought of as a type of natural selection, what happens? Well, in sexual selection, you are acting on an individual's ability to acquire mates. So we have this nice example of a definition here, a process that produces anatomical and behavioral traits that affect an individual's ability to acquire mates. The thing here is that you've got differences in mating, which result in differences in the organisms. Okay, so there is a slide missing here. Oh, that's lovely. Alright, well, we'll just ignore that. So there's different types of mating systems. And we are probably most familiar with monogamy. In a monogamous mating system, you've got one male, one female, generally, and neither sex is able to monopolize more than one member of the opposite sex. So the stable situation is that each sex gets one of the other sex. Now, in polygamy, that's not the case. And there are various different ways that polygamy can occur. You've got polygyny and polyandry. It's also called polygyny. And in polygyny or polygyny, you have one male, many females. Okay? So the male is controlling access to more than one female. Versus in polyandry, you have one female, many males. The female is controlling access to more than one male. And when we think about polygamy, we tend to think about polygyny, with males controlling access to more than one female. Okay, so then there's also promiscuity. That's basically everything thrown in together, where you don't have prolonged associations with your mate, or possibly you have multiple mating by at least one sex. That comes under the category of promiscuity. So, in sexual selection, there are two different types. You have intersexual selection, and you have intrasexual selection. Now, intersexual selection, if you think of the name, think about intra versus interspecies, intraspecies and interspecies. So means between, and intra means within. So intersexual selection, that's between the sexes, between sex competition. That's also known as mate choice. What happens is that you have males competing with females. And you have one sex, which is usually the males, advertising that they are worthy of investment. And you have the other sex, usually females, choosing among them. So that's when we call females are the choosy sex. Now, interestingly, Darwin, he wrote about the origin of species, and he talked about well, how did all these of life happen? Talked about natural selection. The thing is, he was really bothered by certain things that he couldn't explain well, the theory of natural selection. And this is a quote from him in 1860. He said, "The sight of a feather in a peacock's tail, whenever I gaze at it, makes me sick." And why would he say that? Well, you look at this bird. It's a ridiculous bird. This ridiculous tail. Really now, how can this possibly be adaptive? It just doesn't make any sense. And you can't, thing can hardly move. It's got to put all of this investment into all these feathers and colors, and only the males do it. We talk about peacocks, but do you ever hear about peahens? Well, they're kind of drab looking. They're kind of pretty too, but when you look at the male, wow, he's spectacular. We talk about peacocks, but there's also peahens. Those are the females. So the thing was, this was before he had developed his sexual selection theory, which actually explains how this comes about. And it's because the females are choosing males. Well, who gets to mate? Well, the male that the female chooses. So this is a way of explaining these kind of crazy sexual dimorphisms, these crazy differences between the males and the females of the same species, where the male has very elaborate either plumage or behaviors or both that attract females to mate. So talk about this idea called runaway selection. These are supposed to be arrows, well, looking like a circle. And what happens in runaway selection, so there's a trait, for example, long tail, color, etc., that the females prefer. So you make that assumption, and you also add in that this trait is heritable, and that the preference for the trait is also heritable, so it can be passed on between generations. And then you add in this extra thing with that it's self-reinforcing for both sexes. So this can lead to an exaggeration. So what you're happening is that it's an iterative process. So the tail gets a little longer. Ooh, the females like that. Okay, well, then the tails then that selects for even longer tails, and females like that even more. And then even longer tails, and the females really like that. So it's you have a positive feedback loop. If you're familiar with negative and positive feedback loop keeps building and building and building and building and escalating and getting more and more and more exaggerated and ridiculous looking. Okay? And another thing that you can imagine might happen, possibly it could become so extreme that it actually would reduce survival of the males. And of course, survival, if you're not alive, it's not possible to keep mating very easily. And so that is a balancing out factor for this process. Now, there's another alternative hypothesis, the Handicap Hypothesis. And in this, the idea is that this trait, like for example the long tail, is preferred by the females. And the reason is that it actually is possibly an indication of the fitness of the male. And the idea here is that, okay, so you've got this peacock. We've got a good example is a cardinal, bright red. Well, okay, that you're not going to be able to hide. You're not going to be able to easily hide from predators, for example. And yet, if you're still able to survive, despite your investing all these resources into creating these beautiful colors and big long tails and things, and also you're taking these huge risks by being so conspicuous, you're showing off, predators can see you, that if you're still able to survive despite all this, then you're probably genetically superior and a worthy male to mate with. So that's the idea of the handicap hypothesis. I got this handicap, but look, I'm still surviving and doing fine. Mate with me. So the showing off angle doesn't just have to be physically the feathers that the bird has, for instance, or any other animal, can be also behaviors. And sometimes these behaviors are actually linked with the physical traits. Would it be like, you think about, like, have you heard of blue-footed boobies? And they do this dance. They're like, look at my blue feet. And they, do this dance showing off their blue feet. So sometimes they can be linked. And there also can be other really interesting behaviors, such as in the bowerbirds. And you guys can look at this video separately. But the bowerbirds do these really, really elaborate decorating areas where they make these bowers that are really elaborate with colors and all of these things, and it's a very interesting situation. And the birds themselves are not really so much to look at. Instead of investing in, they have a trade-off between investing in their own plumage versus investing in this showing off behavior. Okay, so here's another thing that's interesting: symmetry. And symmetry can actually be an indication of fitness, and it has been linked to mate preference. So fluctuating asymmetry is when there are random deviations from bilateral symmetry when you have paired traits. Okay, so you look at us, you split us down the middle, and our right side and our left side look pretty much the same. But if you look closely, there are differences. And why might some small differences be there? Well, some things that can cause these deviations could be low food quality and quantity, from pollution, disease, maybe from genetics. So it can be caused by things that are a problem. And actually, this is something that can be picked up on when you're choosing a mate. Here's another video. I think I may have to post these links separately. I don't know if you can get these out of here, but you can take a little look and see how symmetry plays out. Okay, so female choice, choosy females. This is something that either can be directly observed or not. It can actually be sort of difficult to figure out how females are making their choices. It makes this area of research pretty tricky. One thing that makes it difficult is that one of the ways that females can make the choice is called cryptic choice, by actually choosing which sperm are used and allowed access. So that makes it really complicated. So there are both external and internal factors at work in how the females make their choices. Now, let's talk about intrasexual selection. Intrasexual selection, that's within sex. So you're talking about males with males or females with females. And when we're talking about this, generally we're talking about competition with one sex. Usually we're talking about males. And what happens is that the winner gains access to the other sex. So you can watch this nice video, cuttlefish, male-male competition, because cuttlefish are awesome. So what's happening here? Okay, you've got males fighting. Why are they fighting? Well, they want to get a mate. They want to keep that mate. And they want to foil the competition. They want to make the other males not get mates. Pretty simple goals here. And you get into issues of dominance. Look at dominance hierarchies. You have, the prototypical, stereotypical example. You think about, oh, okay, the big strong male. He's got lots of women. And then you've got the wimpy male, and, well, he's just sort of on the outskirts, and maybe he gets the, not as desirable females if he's lucky, and if he even gets to mate at all. Whereas this guy is going to be mating with a whole bunch of females. And they all want him. Can't see why. So, in species that have dominance hierarchies, you often see sexual dimorphism. And sexual dimorphism is when you have differences in the between males and females of the same species. A lot of times we talk about it in terms of size, but it can also be in terms of, say, color and other physical features. So, for instance, here we have two really prototypical examples. We've got elephant seals. The males are huge, and the females are much smaller. So this is a male and a female. They're the same species. They look really different, different sizes, but they're the same species. And in this case, the males, they hold huge territories, the dominant males, and they fight each other very viciously. And this is a big deal because where your territory is determines how many females you get to mate with, if you get to mate at all. So this bigger size is advantageous to them in their fights. And here you have another example of major sexual dimorphism. Here's this lovely peahen. Yeah, okay, whatever, but whoa, there's the peacock. Okay. Now, that's not to say that the big bully always wins. There's this other thing called sneaker males and satellite males, okay? Well, what am I talking about? Not this. So, for instance, in the bluegill sunfish, what happens is that their general strategy is that they have males, the parental males are guarding the nests. Okay. But the younger bluegill sunfish have some other strategies that they're operating. So the sneaker males, they're the youngest, and they hide near the nest. And they just wait for an opportunity to dart in and mate with the female. Just sneak right in, unnoticed. They're just little. And sometimes that works. Now here's the other thing. Satellite males, also hanging out around the periphery, they are, you could even say they're even more sneaky than the sneakers. They mimic females. And so they'll go in looking like a female. The parental male there is, dutifully guarding the nest. Just, whatever, it's a female there. And so the satellite male will go in and mate. Very sneaky. So another thing is mate guarding. And so it's basically what it sounds like. You have this mate and you want to guard the mate. It's basically generally males guarding their females. And how does this happen? Well, and maybe you've already mated, but you don't want anybody else to mate with her, or maybe she's about to become reproductively fertile, and you want to be there and be the one to get in there when it's the right time. Maybe you want to mate multiple times. And the way that this happens is sometimes the male actually physically hangs on to the female, as in the case of horseshoe crabs. So here's the female, and here's this male hanging on, literally grasping her and going everywhere that she goes. Very drastic measures here. And sometimes they just hang out nearby. Another thing that males do to fight with each other and try and win out over other males is they can do preventive measures. So, okay, the male mates with the female, as in these moths, and then he sprays her with an anti-aphrodisiac. If you recall what an aphrodisiac is, an anti-aphrodisiac makes her smell totally unattractive. Makes her smell unattractive to potential mates. That seems pretty low, the male. Anyway, so that's something that they do. Then here's another measure. Okay, well, after you mate with the female, you can actually insert something, can plug up her hole so that nobody else can get in. And this is actually quite common. You find it in snakes, lizards, marsupials, rodents, bats, primates even. And so what is the function of this? Well, you're preventing other males from mating. So the idea here is, okay, well, it could enforce chastity, um, but also some other ideas is that maybe it is ensuring that your sperm is retained inside. There's some thought that maybe it aids in sperm transport, and that also possibly you're scent marking the female. There are some very drastic instances of this. So actually, in some spiders, they actually have these they're sort of like arms in front, and that's actually where they transfer the sperm. You talk about sacrificing life and limb. Well, they actually break off their arm inside the female. This penis arm that they have, they actually break it off, and sometimes they actually die in the process. So, pretty drastic. And this is an example. This is a female. Okay. So, then you actually can have competition at the level of the sperm. So how does that work? Well, sperm can you can think about it. You got all these sperm, right? Okay. So who wins? Okay, so you can have an advantage in terms of quantity or quality of the sperm. If you have more sperm, you have better chances. If you have better quality sperm, you have better chances. Another thing that is an example of sperm competition is you actually remove the sperm of other males. So an example of that is the damselfly. And these are damselflies mating, and this is actually the damselfly's penis. And it has, you can see it's very elaborate. It has these kind of barbs on it. It actually acts as a scoop, and so the male goes in, he scoops out the previous male's sperm, and then puts his own in. And then actually, like, there's in this species of bird, they call it cloacal pecking, basically peck out the previous sperm. And then another way you can have sperm competition is actually in heteromorphism, where you have different sperm types, where the sperm you have some sperm that are playing different roles, basically, and they have different morphologies and they play different roles, and so you may have some sperm that are actually infertile. Why would you have infertile sperm? If you want to have a whole lot of sperm, you just want to have a whole lot of fertile sperm. Well, so the function of these is maybe not totally clear and possibly very different in different species, but here are some of the basic potential functions of the parasperm, these infertile sperm. They could be offensive, so you may be killing, displacing the rival sperm. Maybe they're defensive. Maybe they're just there to block rival sperm and basically inhibit another male from mating with that female. Maybe they facilitate the fertile sperm to be able to actually get transported to the egg. Okay. Maybe they provide nutrients to the female or the eggs or the fertile sperm. Maybe some females have spermicides. So you think we talk about arms races, so it's like, okay, well, the male wants to mate, and maybe the female wants to put up barriers to mating. So she actually may produce spermicides that kill the sperm, so maybe it dilutes those effects, allow more sperm to get through. And maybe it also foils her cryptic choice. Having lots of sperm, hey, I'm really fertile, and be like, oh, this is a good choice, mate. So really, there's a variety of competitive strategies in this intrasexual selection. Talked about dominance, these sort of the alternative reproductive strategies like the sneaker males and the satellite males. We're talking about mate guarding, these preventive measures like the repellents and the copulatory plugs, and sperm competition. And the thing to remember here, mating success. Mating success leads to more offspring. And reproductive success is how we measure success in your as an individual. What is your fitness? That's our common currency that we use. So this is really basics for everything. And so some things to think about. Think about investment, different investment from males and females, the parents into the offspring, how competition and mate choice function in evolution, and the different pressures that males and females face. So, some things to think about.